Coming up this week on Beyond the Vibe podcast, we're joined by
Andy Scott of The Sweet.
I was about 10 by then, 10, 11, and my brother and I used to grab the tennis rackets, practice in front of the hall mirror, you know, the steps of the shadows. I really do believe that this lineup, with Paul Manzi as the lead singer and Lee Smalls now in as the bass player, I really do think that this lineup deserves to be heard. We were on national TV and we won it 5 or 6 times, and that's when we got to be the support for Jimi Hendrix on his very first tour. So we went on. I've still got a review somewhere where it said, and of course the Silverstones played a scintillating set and everything was fantastic, and then Jimi Hendrix came on and emptied the hall, you know, which is ridiculous when you think about it.
show that cuts deep into the world of music.
My name is Aaron Day, lead guitarist of UK band These Wicked Rivers, and I'm here with UK music videographer and photographer. It's Mr. Ryan Vasey.
Yes, I don't go abroad just yet.
No, not yet. Well, we've had a lot of questions asking where you're based.
Where does he live?
Where does he live? You know, because the people want to know. This is what the people, and they deserve to know. So I just wanted to get that across there. Did you like my little? I haven't done anything daft in at least a week in the intro. And Ryan, Mr. Vasey does very well to make it ever so professional. So my job is to
bring it down.
Just bring it down, bring the culture down, bring the class, which is my role in most situations. How are you, Mr. Vasey, this week?
Oh, I'm doing well. Of course, we've got Andy Scott of The Sweet.
We have.
Sweet.
Very exciting. Legend.
It's very exciting. It's an interesting one because they're one of probably the longest running bands that we've had.
It's probably the oldest geezer we've had. And I must say, if Andy's
absolutely no discredit.
No, he looks fantastic for his age. I mean, he looks better than me.
It's an interesting one, I think, with them because it's always good to see a band that's kind of done it all.
Yes,
like we've obviously had quite a lot of new bands on, you know, that have only just kind of formed. So we're kind of seeing them at the start of their journey. And with Andy, it's like, you know, he's been there. He's had all of these amazing experiences throughout the years, and it's just interesting to hear like somebody like that kind of speak about that.
I thought you articulated it very well in the interview as well. Like, he wasn't, when you've got such a massive wealth of experiences that you've lived through, you know, it's hard to pick ones out in an interview format to really put across, but he articulated and formed it really well, and it was a really enjoyable interview, you know, to have with him. You know, he showed his experience and his knowledge. You know, it was really interesting that there was a lot of cover stuff in them early days. You know, that was very much how people learned the craft, and like obviously they ended up on Opportunity Knocks and then ended up supporting Hendrix. You know, and it's incredible that they played, people loved it, Hendrix played, you know, and you'll find what happens in the interview. Mr. Vasey loves that. He loves that because I'm pulling you in for the thing. But yes, I mean, it's a weird thing with the early 80s, you British sort of scene, because I think 70s, yes, of course.
We're going to with The Sweet. We're talking about early 70s.
It's like 71, 72 in it. Yeah,
it's very early. But we were talking previously before we started recording this, didn't we? About we felt that kind of that glam rock, that type of rock of that era. It's very English and it's a very British thing, and you know, in America it didn't really happen until the 80s. You know, we were trying to think of like what American glam rock bands of that time were about.
I mean, Kiss were 70s.
Yeah.
And
like, I can only think of Kiss.
I mean, I think of American glam and I think of 80s. I think of Crew and Rat and Dokken and stuff. And it's a completely different style because of the time period as well.
Yeah.
It takes aspects of British glam. I mean, I love like T-Rex and Ballroom are massive for me because it's just so cool. Like, and there's something wonderfully cool about wearing something like that. It gives it this. I mean, when we spoke to Jill from the Damn, she spoke about, because we said we'd just spoken to at the time, and she was really excited about it, which is cool. And we spoke about this concept of when you're younger, rock music feeling like it's, you know, fantasy, like it's another world. And I love glam because it feels like that. You know, different characters on stage, you're literally dressing up as a different character. You know, it's all part of it. You know, and I think think we laid the foundations for American bands then to roll into that. You know, it was good. It was a good chat. I enjoyed it, man.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me because I first kind of was re-aware of them again because I forgot about the Sweet for years, but then I heard Fox on the Run in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Well, they're very classic songs that seem to pop up in films and stuff.
Yeah,
still very contemporary, still very cool.
This was it, and you know, when you look at the catalogue of songs that they've got, you're like, damn, this is like a strong selection of songs that they've done over the years. And you know, we talk about, because they did the Isolation Boulevard, which is like a re-recording of certain different songs, but where they go back to that, and it's interesting that they acknowledge that, but they want to kind of update things as well and do it differently.
Yeah. Considering the band with that many years on the clock as well, like I feel like they're still very much hungry, and I loved Andy's enthusiasm for that and the desire to want to look forward and take this lineup out on the road and show people, you know, that the band's still alive, kicking, and has a lot to give.
Yes, and you can hear all about that now.
So we're here with Andy Scott of the legendary band Sweet. Thanks for joining us, Andy.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm normally down the pub at this hour, but there you go.
We'll try and make it like as close to the pub as we can without.
No, I've decided once a week is my time now. Maybe twice, but Tuesdays, no, absolutely not.
So one thing that we like to do is we like to go back to the beginnings, like the origins of a musician. So when was the first time you remember hearing music and thinking, like, this is what I want to do? Was there a moment for you?
Well, I grew up in a family in North Wales of people who could do things, sing, play piano. My dad had a couple of friends who played guitars, and he thought he was brilliant on the washboard, you know, that kind of thing. You know, there's a lot of American music, you know, early Elvis and Guy Mitchell and people like that. And of course, when Rock Around the Clock, Bill Haley came over, you know, we were all kind of, but I'll tell you what, even at an early age, I remember looking at this old guy with a quiff and thinking, you know, is this the future of music? You know, I was probably about 8, and you're never quite sure about, you know, everything that's kind of going on. But a couple of years later, Cliff Richard and the Shadows started to appear, and I was about 10 by then, 10, 11, and my brother and I used to grab the tennis rackets and practice in front of the hall mirror, you know, the steps of the Shadows. And yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, we had such an eclectic and weird mix of music. My mother was in love with Mario Lanza, and my dad used to sing like Jim Reeves. So, you know, and we all had voices because, well, if you can't sing, you're certainly not Welsh, you know.
Cool. I love that idea, that very vivid memory of you and your brother in front of the mirror. Cause I've got something similar, you know, and I think that's the things that kind of stick with you. That very kind of childlike excitement of just kind of first getting into music and feeling it kind of coursing through you. Yeah. Well, the guitar thing, when one of my dad's friends, because they were still having conscription and things like that up until the end of the 50s, maybe even the early 60s. And when he went off to do his little 18 months in the army, one of my uncles, he left his guitar with us. So my brother and I used to, you know, make horrible sounds with it, you know, didn't even know how to tune it up properly. And then Bert Whedon brought out this book, Play in a Day, which I've still got my copy. It says on the top, Andy Scott's, you know, so if it wasn't mine, I nicked my brother's and wrote my name on the top of it. But he gave you insight with 3 fingers how to play simplistic chords, you know, the old folk tunes, you know, like Three Blind Mice and
and all that kind of thing, or if I had a hammer. And so, you know, once you're getting the right noise out of a guitar, I think you get more interested.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm forever grateful to Bert Whedon, you know, and yeah, and I think if you talk to most guitar players, I certainly know Brian May has still got his copy of Play in the Day.
No, that's cool. No, I love that. So as far as where you started gigging back in 1963 with the Razzjacks, obviously you played in several bands before auditioning for Sweet, including supporting Jimi Hendrix with the Silverstones. But what was the moment for you personally where you thought, like, this is happening now? Like, was it the audition with Sweet, or was it in bands before that? Was it kind of on top of the pops? Like, when was the moment when you really felt like this could be something?
I was in with the Razzjacks. I was in like 2 or 3 other bands around, you know, within a couple of years. Bands like the Four Winds and the Strangers. There was a Wrexham Rolling Stones. You know, they weren't nasty. We just looked nasty. And we used to play all the Stone stuff and the old blues stuff. You know, Howling Wolf, Smokes That Lightning, and we were one of the few bands doing that. Most people were playing chart stuff to get gigs, whereas, you know, the Missing Links, and it was a good name because we certainly looked a bit Neanderthal, was a different kind of band. And it wasn't until the Silverstones or the Silverstones set that I really felt that I was in a band that wanted to do something, because the Strangers were one of the best bands in the area and they had all the best equipment. And when I was asked to join that band, I thought, because I was a bass player back then in the early days, not a guitarist. So when I joined they had a guitar player who had a very expensive Gretsch guitar, and he could play Havana Gila and put things like that behind his neck. You know, he used to get and do a little bit of a saber dance at the same time. You know, so I really thought that band was going places, but the singer and him, they were like solicitors and worked in banks, and you know, they had jobs that they certainly weren't going to give up. So it wasn't until I joined the Silverstones where I really felt that something was happening, because they had the lead singer. His mum was a manager of the band, and she was such a force. You know, we all got swept along with it, and we started to do TV shows in Wales, competitions. I remember the first time I met Andy Fairweather Lowe was on this competition show in South Wales, and I then thought, right, where we were a kind of jazz soul band, everything from Mose Allison all the way through to early Stax and some Tamla Motown. And from there, somebody at that TV, they said, you should go on Opportunity Knocks, you know, the old Huey Green thing.
Yeah.
And it was then that we were on national TV, and we won it 5 or 6 times. So
massive.
You know, and that's when we got to be the support for Jimi Hendrix on his very first tour. From things like that, we were playing a northern venue in Manchester. I don't think it's a venue anymore, but it was called the CIS building, the New Century Hall. And Jimi Hendrix, the week before, they'd had bands like the Four Tops. And the Temptations, you know, it was that kind of a venue, you know, where people would go to dance. And I think it was because Hendrix was black that they thought they were going to get something quite similar. Because these anomalies used to happen back then.
Yeah, of course.
You know, you had Frank Ifield on tour with The Who and things like this, or who was it? Helen Shapiro with the Beatles, you know, and it just so happened that we went on and we were like, well, not the darlings of, but one of the bands locally that had a good following. So we went on. I've still got a review somewhere where it said, and of course the Silverstones played a scintillating set and everything was fantastic. And then Jimi Hendrix came on and emptied the hall, you know, which is ridiculous when you think about it. Absolutely ridiculous. But what it did was the singer and myself were on the side of the stage. I mean, I could have almost touched Jimmy. I was on his side of the stage, and I thought to myself, because I was already playing guitar as well, because the bass player used to play sax in the Silverstone. Right. So I would play guitar and bass. You know, it was one of those things. I really wish I'd had a double necker back then. The upshot of it was that, having seen Hendrix, we knew that there was a change coming in music, and the singer and I, we formed another band within 6 months called the Elastic Band, which was a much more progressive rock band. Probably, how can I put it? I suppose Jethro Tull meets the Graham Bond organization. And we got signed to Decca, and things really started to happen. And at the same time, this is the weird thing, Sweet were just starting out with their they'd released 2 or 3 things on EMI. You know, they were part of that Greenaway and Cook. Well, certainly Brian Connolly was, as a singer, the Greenaway Cook thing. And I'm so glad, because we talked about this afterwards. They were almost a band called the Pipkins, because Greenaway Cook had written this song called Gimme That Thing, and they were looking for somebody to be the foil for it. And Brian was asked, did he want to be one of the guys in the loony suits? And luckily he said no, because that would have been the end of his career. And Sweet would never have broken forward. And luckily, the 2 or 3 songs they did release on EMI, even though they got played on radio rather a lot, they weren't hits, because I think that would have probably set us off on the wrong track. And it's all about sliding doors with me. If you open a sliding door and you go one way, you know, you go the other way. I happen to choose the right way, and Sweet needed a guitar player at the right time. And as they say, after that, everything moved in a different direction, and I certainly brought something to the table that was missing, should we say? You know, at least I have to think like that, because all of a sudden, you know, we were away all over and bigger away from the UK than we were here.
Yeah, we're really interested in this, Andy, because we chat a lot to guests about that kind of like how incredible life is like that, where just moments seem to happen and they just seem to be right. Like you say, at that point when you enter Sweet, it's like they needed that push and that impulse and come in and take them to that next level. But at the same time, they were ready for that. That's exactly what they needed at that point. And there's so many different sliding doors, as you say, that get you to that point. And if one of them slides a different way, your entire life's completely different, and we wouldn't be sat here now chatting to you. You know, it's incredible, really, when you look back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Steve, the bass player, Mick, the drummer, and myself, we were all on the same page musically. You know, we all loved The Who and Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and the Black Sabbath. And it was right at that late 60s time, early 70s, where the 3-piece guitar, bass, drums with a singer was the way that the bands seemed to be going. You know, instead of having a rhythm guitar player or a keyboard player, they were concentrating more on more guitar riff kind of things. But Phil Wainman, the producer, I think he saw something a little bit more than Nicky Chin did. Nicky Chin, being part of the songwriting team, all he cared about was the songs that they were writing were going to, you know, get played and give him the kind of fame that he craved. Whereas the band were more interested in how can we turn this away from those early pop hits into something a little more credible, you know. And it is remarkable that here we are 52, 53 years later, still going on tour, hopefully in November, December in the UK.
Yeah, man.
And speaking of that, all this time later, obviously last year you released the Isolation Boulevard. This was, of course, inspired by the third album, Desolation Boulevard. Did you have a certain vibe that you wanted to achieve this time around with the record? And if so, how did you go about this, like particularly in isolation? You know, it's a difficult thing, isn't it?
Yeah, difficult. I have to say, anybody who tells you that they got a bunch of singers and a bunch of musicians all online, and you see all these little pictures and they're all singing in time and in tune, bullshit. That don't happen. However good Zoom is, or however, yes, you send the file to somebody and he puts his part down and sends it back. You need somebody to join the dots and put it all, like work the magic and put it all together. Then you can have everybody being filmed and adjust the pictures to go with it. We had a few things like that, whereby the singer did a few things in his home studio, and our new bass player Lee did something similar. But I tried to get them down here. There was a period last year where lockdown was eased, and we were able to have 6 people together and things like that. September, October, something like that. Maybe August, September, and we had been working on some backing tracks as re-records anyway, but we didn't have enough. And I remember finding some drum tracks. Some of those drum tracks are from live gigs, and with the studio stuff that you can do, you can change the drum sound slightly by if you want a certain sound within the album. Now you've got this magical way of basically saying, well, every time he hits the snare drum, it'll sound a bit more like that rather than the original. And that's all we did. Once I'd found about a dozen drum tracks that we could work with, we were off and running. Plus, where Bruce had to play some stuff, he's not very technical and he doesn't have stuff in his place. You kind of help him and make him play things that you want him to play. And I wanted some loose endings. I didn't want things that sounded trite, with fades and things like that. So luckily we found like every time you play live, you've always got an ending, So it became obvious that people wanted to hear the hits, but I wanted to get in a couple of the heavier tracks as well, like Set Me Free. And Set Me Free had been recorded by Saxon and a few others. I think there's a version by Def Leppard that still hasn't been released. So I just wanted to get that out there, and lo and behold, it actually went in some of the charts. Now, it's impossible to know what the real charts are anymore because of streaming and how the hell can you use Spotify as it's a gauge, but it's got nothing to do with sales as such. It's we used to there were lorry loads of vinyl going out when in our day, so you knew you were selling records. Now it's very, very difficult to to keep on top of everything that's going on, and our fans still buy physical product. Well, they would. It's like they still think of downloading as the work of the devil. So
it's because it is, Andy. That's why.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned about the album obviously came out last year, and it having some of the re-recorded old tracks that you'd kind of already started to put together, as well as some of the heavier stuff. For fans that they're watching the interview that haven't checked out the album, how would you describe it?
It's a modern take on what we do best, basically. Cool. I've got a young band that I produce at the moment called the Nova Teens. They're really fantastic. They're from Bath, just down the road from where I live, and we've been in Peter Gabriel's studio in Bath a few times, and we've made an incredible pile of material. They're so good, I can't believe that nobody's signed them. And they've got a little bit of a wizard who enjoys the computer work, because me and that. Don't ask me, because it'll get wiped and you won't find it again. You got to start looking at the dates when you recorded to try and find the files. So a young kid who knows what he's doing. He's not a kid; he's in his early 20s. But it's remarkable what somebody like that can bring to a band like Sweet. And I let him have his head a little bit. Come on. Show me what you can do, and then I show him how to record things backwards in digital, like reverse echoes and things. Because he just thinks that you turn the reverb round, and I said, no, you're an idiot. You don't do that. You've got to record it backwards. You've got to record the voice backwards with the reverb and then turn it over. Otherwise, you don't get the same effect.
Oh, and
cool. And then he understands now the analog side of things, because he is quite enamored when he sees my stack of 2-inch tapes, the hundreds of things that I've got lying around the place. I don't have a machine anymore, sadly. It started to fall apart, and Don Larkin is still either going to sell it or repair it. I haven't worked it out yet. It's been there for 12 years, so there you go.
That's cool. I like the fact that you're giving them the opportunity to learn from you, and you're learning from him, man. It's nice that you've got that open-mindedness and wanting to share your wisdom.
It's the sound, a new head with what you can do in the digital field. My son thinks it's one of the best things that he's heard from the band, and he's in his he's 49 this year, but he has heard everything, since he was a kid, and it's remarkable that he thinks we sound fresh again. To me, I'm just sitting there going, no, do another mix. That you're missing this and that. So I'm still thinking it sounds similar, but obviously the little bit of the old what was it? Have you heard a tape by the Troggs from the 60s, recorded in the studio, where Reg Presley is having a go at the drummer?
No.
Heard this tape?
No.
Anyway, he basically there's some kind of guy in there, a producer of sorts, and he said, "So what do you want me to do then?" He said, "Sprinkle some fairy dust over the tape, and all of a sudden it's going to sound fantastic." Well, that's what digital can do. It's that little bit of fairy dust,
So Sweet are on tour in November with Limehouse Lizzie. The band have obviously got like a wealth of material at this point in your career. What comes into deciding a set list at this point to kind of cover this like timeline that you now have? And is there any can fans expect any surprises? Any that you throw in there?
Well, they can always expect surprises, because I'm still alive and I'll step on the stage. Yeah, we do try and throw something new in with each tour. They keep asking for a song called and we haven't performed it in its entirety, the full version, since the 70s, when we actually used to carry an extra guitar player and a couple of keyboard players on the later tours in America, because it's got it's called Windy City, and you don't need that. You can pare it right down. So I'm really hoping that that we can get to grips with it, and we get the guy who is the second guitar and keyboards to get his instead of half learning it, learn it all the little bits, like you have done with Love Is Like Oxygen. Don't think you can fanny your way through it, because it doesn't work like that. It's got lovely little complexities, and without them, it's I'm not saying it's just another heavy metal song, but it's like a pub band playing a Who song. You walk into the pub and you think, oh, they should know Can't Explain, but they fucking don't. There's something that the Who do and that Sweet do that make it that way. I was talking to people. I mean, I've got to know people like Steve Lukather, and we were talking about are you precious? Do you have to have your guitars and amps there? He said, well, I wouldn't mind having my guitar, but he said, whatever amp I plug through, it still sounds like me. And I said, exactly. It will always. It's in the fingers. It's in the arms. It's in in what you do. Certain people press the strings like Tony Iommi. You know, I think he presses the strings on the neck harder than most people, and Richie Blackmore doesn't. You know, he hairy fairies. You know, it sounds big, but he's not touching it much. You know, and you know, so we've all got our. I mean, if you pick Richie's guitar up and you press hard on the string, it'll change. You'll have that micro. It won't be quite as in tune because he's used to playing it with the high frets. You know.
No, I love diving into that sort of conversation because I'm a guitarist and I find it really interesting. You know, I mean, with that kind of in mind, when you initially auditioned for Sweet back in the day, we talk a lot to bands about kind of the character you are on stage and kind of developing that, because I mean I always find that when I'm on stage I've got a different persona than I am when I come off it. I mean, particularly for you when you audition for Sweet with that whole kind of glam band image, you know, what did you go into the audition with a character in mind and what you wanted to portray, and how has that changed over time to obviously where you are now, you know?
It wasn't like that in the beginning. They just wanted somebody who could play well. Yeah,
I like that. Yeah,
because there was no and a voice, and my voice is the high voices. So when you join for 4-part harmony, mine always sits on the top.
Yeah,
and it was something natural to do. And remember, we were doing a lot of covers. We even had a medley of Who songs, and I remember Pete Townsend saying in an interview that he snuck into a Sweet gig and was amazed how good the Who medley was that night. You know.
Oh, so, wow. I bet that meant a lot to you personally, being a big Who fan.
Yeah. So you know, it's things like that, and I mean, I was into bands, you know, like Spirit and Crazy Horse, and so when I joined, I basically said, instead of doing the hits of today, we should have a set that's a little bit more in tune with, you know, songs that they recognize, like 8 Miles High by the Byrds, you know, and I knew we could do it because of our vocal ranges, and I think there's a BBC recording of that somewhere, so you start to develop a set that's different from all the other new bands that are coming through, the cover bands, because you've only had 1 or 2 hits, and they're not really what you want to be playing. So, you know, in your set, you're playing a couple of Led Zeppelin songs and a few of the, you know, like Buffalo Springfield or something like that, to just mix it up. And back then, you had to play 2 45-minute sets. So one would be the early one would be slightly more poppy, and the later one would have some of the more drama in it, you know. But probably by late 72, when glam was really starting to, you know, for want of a better word, was starting to kick in, and Mark Bolan was the cheerleader. You know, you then start to develop something on stage. You can't just chuck your amp on stage and play. You know, you want to dress it up a little bit more. So, you know, it probably took us a good year and a half before, you know, things started to happen. I remember dragging Mick along to see Slade at the end of 1971 because I knew the band, you know, from the Elastic Band days when they were called the In-Betweens, and I said they are going to go places. You know, I don't think they'd even had a hit by then. We'd already had 1 or 2, and they released "'Cause I Love You," you know, with the bass player playing the violin. And we went to this place in London, the old boathouse at Kew Bridge. I have never heard anything so fucking loud in all my life. And Mick and I both looked at them and went, yeah, competition, lots of competition here, you know. So all of a sudden, and we'd met Mark Bolan at a German award ceremony where we were the best new band in Germany. And there were those two moments of us realizing that we're playing a bit of catch up here, And by 73, you know, we had caught up, you know, with songs like Blockbuster and Ballroom Blitz, you know.
No, fair play to you. I bet it was an exciting time to feel part of that scene, and to be fair, it feels like you and the boys adapted really well to it, because some bands can really stick to what they know and what they feel is comfortable, whereas you had that drive and that determination to want to not jump on the bandwagon, but you felt like it was a natural progression. Every band needs to adapt a little bit to the scene in order to move forward.
Well, you need to find yourself, and on albums like Sweet Fanny Adams and Desolation Boulevard, and then what's known as the heavy metal album, Give Us a Wink, we were developing differently from what you were hearing on the UK, and it's like boxes. They like to put you in boxes, or if you're a leopard and you got spots, you're always going to be a leopard, even though you're now painting yourself with tiger stripes. And it's a bit like that in the UK. It's very, very difficult. It doesn't appall me, but it's almost lazy journalism, whereby even today I do an interview with a paper and they go for a stock image from 1971, 72, you know, and you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, there's loads better than that out there. You know, but it's what they've got in their library, and they throw it up and say, "Oh yeah, I remember Sweet looked a bit like that." You know, not now. You know? So we are trying to put imagery of the band today. It's been quite difficult in the pandemic, you know, getting us all together. But we could do with a new band photo. But you know, you just got to make sure that when you do interviews, that the right photos are used, you know.
Yeah, 100%. Because my next question will be about the next chapter of the band, you know, and it is chapters, you know, and it feels like yourself and Sweet have still got loads to give, you know. So you want people to portray that it's current and that it's active and moving forward. And for yourself, Andy, like, what do you see as the next chapter for yourself and the band, like after the
I have said this a couple of times, but I really do believe that this lineup, with Paul Manzi as the lead singer, and Lee Smalls now in as the bass player, he's got an incredible voice as well, with Bruce and myself. I really do think that this lineup deserves to be heard.
Yeah. And
all the way through the pandemic, I was determined to at least get something out there. And of course, you know, it got the stuff that we did release, you know, Still Got the Rock and Set Me Free, you know, did get some play, you know, on a fair bit more on commercial radio and radio stations like Planet Rock. But the BBC also played stuff. Set Me Free was more of a late night thing, and Still Got the Rock was was played on a couple of the the usual shows in the daytime, not playlist stuff, you know, whereby, you know, like Ed Sheeran or Girls Aloud or whatever. Who's the other lot? There's another lot of
we stay clear of that world, Andy. Yeah.
But that's the problem, you see. Everywhere you go, you hear the same thing, and that's not healthy, I don't think.
No, not at all.
You know, you've got to mix it up. And it's very, very difficult today. And I'm not knocking it, but there is a glut of singer-songwriters because of people like Ed Sheeran, who writes fantastic material. But you know, all of a sudden, you've got a choice. Who is that? You know, it could be one of a dozen people.
Yeah.
And there are names that crop up, you know, winning at the Brits. You know, well, the Brits when we were coming through, you know, was not a big pizzazz thing. It was just a few people backslapping, you know, in the restaurant below the Cumberland Hotel or something, you know, and bands like us never used to get invited. So, you know, fuck them. You know, and I think it's because of the Grammys and, you know, all this stuff. They Britain felt it needed to, you know, to kind of catch up, and I'm not cynical, but I don't ever see us being inducted into any halls of fame anywhere. I mean, we have in Germany and places like that in Australia. I think we were honoured as like some lifetime award, and we got a lifetime radio award in Europe somewhere. And you know, that to me is where we are. I think that the UK does have a narrow view. I mean, you don't even hear about bands like Led Zeppelin very much, only when they're releasing some fantastic box set of stuff. At least the Who seem to be keeping themselves in the mainstream and playing places like Glastonbury. You know, it's a funny old world, as Jimmy Greaves used to say.
No, I mean, like I like the fact though. I kind of feel that for you, Andy, like getting that airplay with the songs from the album that you did in lockdown, kind of means more to you than that kind of like playlist recognition, or to know that people still want to give a platform to the band and are still really receptive to that. I think it's really cool, and like you say, particularly because you have so much faith in that lineup, and I think, like you say, so obviously you've got the UK tour with Limehouse Lizzie, which kicks off in Brighton at the Chalk 25th November of this year, and folks can obviously check that out and check out this lineup in all its glory, which I think is probably when it's at its best, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, having a band like Limehouse Lizzie as the opening act, we're going to have to be on our toes here, I think, because they're really, really bloody good,
Yeah, big. Well, the one the legendary bands on the circuit, and I've been.
Yeah, I'm just hoping. I'm going to certainly send him a message. I'm hoping that Scott might show up at the London date,
Awesome.
but maybe he doesn't like the idea of there being a Thin Lizzy that's pretty good. I just don't know. I've talked to him about that.
It'd be cool. It'd be cool to see a rock up and to see what he thinks of it. It's a good lineup, man. I think a lot of people will be really excited for it. Do you have any other shows coming up, or is it mainly just focused on that tour?
Well, we've got one at the beginning of September that I'm involved with as part of the original three guys who started it. We all ended up. My local publican, Richard Ballroom, and Johnny Callis, John Grubby Callis, works for McCartney. He's his sound man, and myself. We all ended up with. Mine was prostate cancer, so was Johnny's, and Richard had a eye socket cancer. So you'd never know, but he's when he's had a few beers, it gets a bit lazy. That one, and we always said that the area behind the pub is a big kind of field, and you sometimes see half a dozen caravans on there, in the summer, and I thought surely there's a better use of it, and we now have this festival. It's a 2-dayer this year, called Rock Against Cancer.
Oh, fantastic.
The website is Concert at the King's. On the Saturday is Billy Ocean, Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel Suite, and the Electric Strobes. They're bringing the full band this time, and a few of the local acts like the Novatines are playing on the Saturday as well. And then on the Sunday, we've got 10cc, Graham and the lads.
Yeah.
And then you've got the SAS band. I don't know if you've heard of these. Spike, the keyboard player for Queen, has his own outfit called SAS, Spike's All Stars, and he usually brings along. I'm hearing. I don't know whether I should be saying this, but some of the names are, quite stellar. That he brings along, singer wise. It's a little bit like bands like Bill Wyman's Rhythm Kings, where he'll have a couple of very well-known singers with him, and the same with Jules Holland. He'll have and Spike's like that, but it's more of a rock band, like guitar, keyboards, might have a brass section, a couple of backing singers, and other singers will get up. Now, they'll probably play last because they're more like a show within itself.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, similar to Troggs.
And it's it's a good lineup. Oh, and Lindisfarne are coming on Sunday.
Oh, brilliant!
Well.
I've got a soft spot for Lindisfarne.
Yeah. I love when these are all bands who have played on previous occasions, and we decided this year after the pandemic to invite back as many people who've played previously. Lindisfarne were great when they played here the last time.
Oh, so that sounds like a great weekend.
And I can walk to this.
That's definitely the number one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when they're doing sound checks or when it's in full flow, if I'm not down there, I can still hear it. So
fantastic. No, people should definitely check that out. It sounds brilliant.
Yeah, the website is concertatthekings.co.uk.
Fantastic. Cheers, Andy.
One thing that we like to finish the show on, it's a bit of a hypothetical question. So if you could tour with one band from the past and one band from the present, who would they be?
You mean as Sweet or me?
It's up to you.
Yeah, it's we'll call it your tour.
Well, we've been very lucky in the past, and in America, performed alongside, Alice Cooper and Kiss and Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band and Cheap Trick, Kansas, Journey, REO Speedwagon.
Are you just showing off now, Andy?
Well, it's what happened.
No, it's just that's it. You've earned it, man. You've earned it.
We were lucky that we had a few that went in the never had a number one, but were high in the Billboard charts for a while. And then, of course, towards the end of the 70s, you become what's known as the best or a good sandwich band. So they have a new band starting, us in the middle, and then a headline act. And the bands today, that's quite a difficult one. I mean, I actually produced something very early on with Iron Maiden.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and it didn't see the light of day. They wanted the version of Running Free that was released is still, that's the demo. They wanted me to with the new lineup with the new drummer to they thought they could just get the drummer to play along to a track that's out of time, and I said good luck with that. You could probably do it today digitally. You could probably straighten it up a bit, but back then what was recorded, and I said, well, it's out of time there, so he's still gonna have to play out of time. So we laid down a really good backing track, and we're waiting for Paul Di'Anno, who had pulled a muscle or strained himself in his stomach. I'm now wondering whether they just wanted to get it out so that they could then get rid of him and get another singer in.
Maybe.
There's all kinds of things that go on here. But today, I mean, I have a soft spot, for certain bands, but there is only one rock band today that you'd want to, and I'd love to meet him because I haven't. Is Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters? That would be fantastic.
Okay, so you'd have
if you're looking for a support band, Dave.
I mean, he's obviously a regular.
Big fan of the show. Yeah. Big fan of the show, Andy. So you do the right thing. So that'd be your new. That'd be your new band.
You'll get that message then.
Yeah, we'll pass it on. Don't worry. We're seeing him tomorrow, so we'll pass it on, mate. So they're your new band. Who would be your old band?
I suppose if I went all the way back, I would probably still choose, because we used to love, whenever the Elastic Band played in London, the Graham Bond organisation, which had Ginger Baker on drums,
very good,
Jack Bruce on bass, and Dick Hextall Smith playing the saxophones, sometimes two at a time, and Graham Bond playing the Hammond organ. And Jack Bruce used to play a 6-string bass, so he was sounding all over the place. And that for me was, if there is anything up on YouTube, you should go and check it out.
I really want to check that out. It sounds great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But then, once again, I never got to go to America in the 60s, but so bands like the Buffalo Springfield and Spirit, Randy California, the Doors, I saw them at the Roundhouse when they came to London, and that was completely, fantastic as well,
No, that's it. I mean, I'm a big Buffalo Springfield fan as well, and I'd love to have seen the Doors. Just legendary stuff. We'll go with the Graham Bond Band because I think that's something that
Graham Bond Organisation.
Graham Bond Organisation. Okay. So the tour is we're having Foo Fighters open. Dave will be fine about that. We'll have a word. We'll be all right about that. And then we'll have Sweet in the middle, as you say, the filler band. And then we'll have the Graham Bond Organisation.
Yeah.
We'll get it sorted for next year.
Yeah.
And it'll be stellar. Thanks ever so much for your time, Andy. Appreciate it. Like we said, you can catch the Suite on their November UK tour. You can get tickets direct from their website, or I believe from Gig Cartel, and definitely go and check it out because, as Andy said, this lineup is such a great representation of the band. And with Limehouse Lizzie as well, that'll be a riot.
Good night.
I'm just intrigued. You're not fans of the Far Side, are you, Gary Larson?
No, I've never heard of the Far Side. To call your show, is it Beyond the Vibe? It is, yes.
Yeah, well, I think Gary Larson's got one of his cartoon books that's called something like, Beyond the something. And I just thought to myself, yeah, I wonder whether they've got that sort of off-the-wall sense of humour here.
We'll have to check it out.
Yeah, we'll have to pretend in future that's that was our intention.
Because that sounds way cooler than the real reason, which is probably just me and Ryan just saying loads of... Yeah. We'll check that out. That sounds cool. Thanks ever so much for your time. I really appreciate it, man.
No problem.
Really enjoyed chatting to you.
Yeah.
And that was Andy Scott of The Suite. We said it after the interview, didn't we, Mr. Vasey, that it flowed so well chatting to Andy. Like I felt like he's probably spoke about the band for a long time, and he's pretty much a pro at it. But it was cool. It was like he didn't go on for too long. He wasn't too nostalgic. As we said before, and it was really cool. And like we said, I love the fact that he's looking forward and believes this lineup is one of the best representations of the band.
Yes, and for me, I like the as we said just then, it's like there's so much enthusiasm. To talk about, just generally everything he's done, but then what he's going to do, and what he's done recently. It's like you could become quite jaded or bored of perhaps answering similar questions over the years because he's been at this game a long time. And
it was nice, wasn't it? He was really receptive to what for the nonsense we were flying at him, and he seemed really up to it. I'd have to admit that before the interview, I told him that I was a bit unwell recently and that I cried at a West Ham documentary, and I think at that point he thought, "Fucking hell, what have we got on our hands?" But to be fair to him, he was an absolute gentleman and a saint, and I really enjoyed chatting to him, man. I felt inspired chatting to him. It was nice. He made me want to try and record vocals backwards and then reverse the reverb. I might do that tonight till 4 a.m. So Andy, if I get sacked tomorrow, it's just all on your shoulders, man. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I liked that dip into that era, and I like the way he spoke about how quickly things changed at that time as well. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like within a couple of months, it's like people start doing this, and then it's like you're catching up with them a little bit. It's I imagine because there's so much new stuff that's happening at that time. I imagine the surge of the wave is so immense. So much different than anything we'll probably ever experience in our time because everything's really happened, hasn't it?
And one of the big things for me was when he talked about being kind of inducted into, I believe it was like a German equivalent of like a Hall of Fame.
Yes,
which is amazing.
It seemed really like the big in Germany.
Yeah, but it's like the Germans are big on like rock and that whole metal scene and stuff, and
to be held in that regard.
Yeah, to hold them so highly after all these years, it shows that there's real quality still there, isn't there?
And we'll be going to check them out when they tour with Limehouse Lizzie. Yeah, we'll go to our local rock city,
of course,
in Nottingham, and have a chat with Andy. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. I've never seen the Suite.
No, neither have I.
I think it'd be a cool experience.
A new experience. That is, of course, it for this week on Beyond the Vibe. But if you like what we're doing, you can subscribe, and then we can continue to show content and have new things.
We can indeed. Did I put you off with my gas?
You threw me off.
I love it. I got one in for this episode.
But of course, if you want to find out what guests we're going to have, you can like our Facebook page as well, where every Wednesday from 10 a.m. We reveal who that guest is in the form of a trailer.
We do indeed, and as we say every week, we have all different types of guests. I think the past 2 weeks have probably showcased that. We're very lucky to chat to some awesome people, whether they be part of the new wave of classic rock or whether they be part of the older bands that are being a bit more nostalgic, but also looking forward to what's next for them. And if you, like Ryan said, if you subscribe, just lets us know you're enjoying the vibe. It gives us the motivation to keep doing what we're doing. If you don't enjoy it, you don't need to post dog poo through my letterbox like you have been doing. I'd prefer if you didn't do that. Just don't unsubscribe. But we prefer if you subscribe. But thanks for enjoying the vibe. And we're also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as YouTube. But if you get here, you get extra content like our top 10s, alongside getting to see our lovely faces.
Yes, and of course this week you get to see Andy Scott's amazing hair.
So magical.
Which you can only see if you watch the video.
It's magical.
So if you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you got to get over to YouTube to check all of those amazing things out.
It's 100% amazing. It's even better over Zoom, so make sure you don't miss out on that. But thank you for joining the vibe. We love you all, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.